When I decided to rent the cabin, I was looking for peace. Just some time to clear my head. The listing made it sound perfect. Secluded in the woods, quiet, no cell service. It was exactly what I needed. Yeah, there were whispers about the area being haunted, but I didn't care. I've never been one to believe in that stuff. Besides, the price was unbeatable, and the photos showed this charming, rustic vibe. It looked like the kind of place where you'd sit by the fire with a book, surrounded by nature. But when I got there, the atmosphere hit me hard. The cabin wasn't just rustic, it felt tired. The walls were warped, and the air smelled like wet earth, like the woods outside were slowly creeping in. Even the way the trees surrounded the clearing made the place feel caged in, like the forest was deliberately keeping an eye on it. I found the note right away, sitting in the middle of the kitchen table. It was written in shaky handwriting on yellowed paper, like whoever wrote it had done so in a hurry. It listed rules, actual rules, like some weird backwoods manual for surviving a weekend getaway. Lock all doors and windows before sunset. Okay, sure, that's just good safety sense. Do not extinguish the candle on the windowsill, no matter what. Weird but fine. If you hear knocking after midnight, don't open the door, even if you recognize the voice. That one gave me pause. The last rule? Return from the forest before dark. And if you hear footsteps behind you, do not look back. I'll admit, I laughed a little. It was so bizarre and dramatic. Still, I kept the note. I figured it was just a quirky touch left by a paranoid owner. But now, I wish I'd taken it seriously from the start. The first night was unsettling. I followed the rules, partly because I thought they were kind of funny, and partly because, well, why not? I locked every door and window, even checked them twice. The candle on the windowsill was already lit when I arrived, so I left it alone. As the sun went down, the forest seemed to close in tighter around the cabin. It got so dark outside that the windows became mirrors, reflecting the flickering candlelight. Around midnight, I heard it, faint footsteps on the porch. My stomach dropped. It wasn't the wind or some raccoon. It was deliberate paced. I froze, straining to hear more, but whoever or whatever it was didn't knock. They just walked around the cabin, slow and heavy, before fading into the distance. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old floorboard sounded like someone creeping closer. The next morning, I convinced myself it had to be a deer, or maybe my imagination playing tricks. I decided to shake it off and explore the forest. It was beautiful in the daylight, but there was something off about it. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on me. I started noticing these carvings on the trees. Spirals, stick figures, even faces. They weren't random. Either they were deliberate and perfectly spaced, like someone had marked a path. By the time I turned back, the sky was already shifting to that late afternoon orange, and I realized I'd gone further than I thought. On the way back, I swear I heard footsteps trailing me, just barely audible over the crunch of leaves. I told myself it was just an echo or an animal, but I didn't dare look back. That night, I felt the weight of the cabin pressing down on me. It wasn't just the isolation. I've spent time alone before, and it never felt like this. It was like the place itself didn't want me there. I locked everything up again and checked the candle. It had burned low during the day, but was still lit. I thought about blowing it out just to test the rule, but something stopped me. It wasn't fear exactly, more like instinct. Around midnight, I heard it again, the footsteps, but this time they came straight to the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks followed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever was outside might hear it. Then, I heard my brother's voice. "It's me, man. Open up." My brother hadn't even known I was here. I didn't move. The voice called again, louder this time, but there was this wrongness to it. The tone was too flat, too mechanical, like someone trying to mimic him, but not quite getting it right. The rest of the night was worse. The knocking stopped, but the cabin felt alive. The shadows cast by the candle didn't stay still. They twisted and stretched across the walls, almost like they were reaching for me. Every now and then I thought I heard whispering, not words exactly, just soft, urgent sounds like someone trying to get my attention. At one point, I thought I saw a movement outside the window, but I didn't dare pull the curtain back to look. I stayed awake until dawn, sitting at the edge of the bed with a flashlight and a kitchen knife. When the first light broke through the trees, the whispers stopped, the shadows faded, and everything went eerily quiet. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all, but then I saw the marks. On the door, right where I'd heard the knocking, were deep, uneven scratches, like something with claws had tried to get in. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Even in the daylight, the cabin felt oppressive. I tried to distract myself by cleaning up and organizing the place, but I kept catching glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. When I finally worked up the courage to step outside, I noticed something strange. The forest seemed different. The trees that had been so tightly packed the day before now seemed spaced farther apart, like the woods were subtly rearranging themselves. The carvings on the trees were still there, but now some of them looked freshly made. Deeper grooves, raw wood exposed, like someone had been out there since yesterday. I thought about following the path again, but decided against it. The way things were going, I wasn't sure I'd make it back before dark. That evening, I found something new, a diary tucked away in one of the kitchen drawers. It looked old, the leather cover cracked and worn, and the pages were filled with cramped, hurried handwriting. Most of it didn't make sense. Rambling descriptions of shadows, voices, and rules that change. But one entry caught my attention. If you hear them calling, no matter how familiar the voice, do not answer. They're not who they sound like. My hands were trembling as I read it. There were other entries too, mentioning the candle and the forest, but the last line chilled me to my core. They don't want the cabin. They want you. That was it. I decided I wasn't staying another night. I packed my bag, ready to leave first thing in the morning. I didn't care if I lost the deposit or had to walk the whole way back to town. That night, it felt like the cabin was testing me. I locked everything up as usual and made sure the candle was still burning, but the atmosphere had shifted. The air felt charged, like the moments before a lightning strike. Around midnight, the knocking returned, this time louder and more insistent. 3 heavy bangs, followed by silence. Then more voices. Not just one, but many. They whispered my name, over and over, each voice overlapping the next. Some sounded like people I knew, my mom, my best friend, even an old coworker I hadn't spoken to in years. But beneath the familiarity was something else, a tone that sent shivers through my spine. I crouched in the corner of the bedroom, clutching the flashlight and knife, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. That's when I saw it. The shadows on the wall, usually cast by the candle, were moving again, but now they weren't just shapes. They were figures, human-like but wrong, with long, twisted limbs and heads that tilted unnaturally. I couldn't look away. The shadows crawled along the walls, coming closer, their shapes growing sharper and more defined. I could see fingers, too many fingers stretching toward me. The whispers turned to low, guttural sounds like growls or words I couldn't understand. I thought about running, but where? The forest felt just as dangerous as the cabin. Then, without warning, the candle went out. The darkness was suffocating. I scrambled to relight it, fumbling with the matches, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That's when the banging on the door started again, harder this time, like whatever was outside was trying to break it down. And then came the worst part. The door handle began to turn, slowly. I don't know what came over me, but I bolted for the kitchen. Maybe I thought I'd be safer there, or maybe I just needed to move. Anywhere but that bedroom. The banging on the door didn't stop, and the handle was still rattling, but it didn't open. I locked myself in the pantry, pressing my back against the door and clutching the knife like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps inside the cabin. Slow, deliberate steps, as if someone or something was walking through the rooms looking for me. The whispers started again, closer this time, echoing through the walls. They were saying my name, but now it wasn't just whispers. It was loud, insistent, almost angry. I shut my eyes, hoping it would stop, but the sound only grew louder, until it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The whispers, the footsteps, even the banging on the door. I stayed in the pantry for what felt like hours, too scared to move. When I finally worked up the courage to step out, the cabin was deathly quiet. But something was wrong. The candle on the windowsill was lit again, even though I hadn't touched it. And the front door? It was wide open. I froze, my mind racing. Had I forgotten to lock it? No, I checked it twice. I was sure of it. I crept toward the door, peering out into the forest, but there was nothing there. Just the dense, unbroken darkness. I thought about making a run for it, but something in the air held me back, like the forest itself was daring me to step outside. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the candle, trying to piece together what was happening. The scratches on the door were deeper now, almost carving through the wood. And there was something else, faint, smeared handprints on the walls, like someone or something had been dragging their fingers along the inside of the cabin. I kept telling myself that as soon as the sun came up, I'd leave. I didn't care how far I had to walk or what it cost me. But when dawn finally came, it brought no relief. The forest outside was covered in a thick fog that seemed to cling to the trees, and the usual sounds of birds or wind were completely absent. It felt like the world beyond the cabin didn't exist anymore. As I stepped outside, I realized the forest had changed again. The path I'd used to get there was gone, replaced by an overgrown trail leading deeper into the woods. Panic started to set in. I turned back toward the cabin, but it looked different too. The windows were completely blacked out, like there was no light inside. It didn't make sense. I'd just come from there. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching leaves behind me. My chest tightened. I remembered the rule. Don't look back. But every instinct in my body screamed at me to see what was there. Against every ounce of common sense, I turned around. I wish I hadn't looked. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. It was a figure, but it didn't look human. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that bent at strange angles, like a broken marionette. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side, and its eyes, if you could call them that, were just two empty voids, darker than anything I'd ever seen. It didn't move, but I could feel it watching me, like it was studying me, waiting for me to do something. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but somehow I managed to stumble backward toward the cabin. The thing didn't follow me, not at first, but I could feel it, like it was in the air around me, making my skin crawl. When I made it back inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it, but I knew that wouldn't keep it out. The rules didn't say anything about what to do if you broke them. I sat on the floor, staring at the candle, hoping it would protect me somehow. Then I heard it. Not footsteps this time, but a low, guttural sound like a growl mixed with laughter. It was coming from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, even the floor beneath me. The shadows started moving again, more violently this time, twisting and writhing like they were alive. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the growling, like the cabin itself was mocking me. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed, watching the shadows close in. At some point, the growling stopped, replaced by a deafening silence that made my ears ring. Then, the candle went out again, but this time I didn't bother trying to relight it. I could feel the thing outside, or maybe it was inside now, I couldn't tell. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing me into the floor. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the front door creaked open on its own. There was nothing outside but darkness, thick and impenetrable, like the night itself had swallowed the forest whole. And then in the doorway, I saw it. That figure, tall and distorted, standing perfectly still, just staring at me. It didn't come inside, but it didn't need to. I knew it was in control now. When I woke up, if you can call it waking up, it was morning, and everything was normal. The cabin looked the same as when I'd first arrived. The scratches on the door were gone, the candle was unlit but intact, and there were no handprints on the walls. For a split second, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. But then I saw it, a new note on the kitchen table. The handwriting was different, more precise this time, but the message was clear. You broke the rules. You belong to us now. I ran outside, desperate to find the trail back to the road, but all I found was more forest, endless and unchanging. I'm still here, writing this, hoping someone reads it. If you find this cabin, don't stay. Whatever's out there doesn't just want you gone. It wants you to become part of it.